afternoon. This is our PowerHour event on Inclusive Reciprocal Mentoring. And we are joined today by Dr. Chloe Sellwood, who is Assistant Director of Emergency Preparedness, Resilience and Response, as well as Sarah Martindale, Senior Programme Manager for Performance, Information and Regulation Directorate, both from NHS England London Region. They will explain the benefits of inclusive reciprocal mentoring and take us through the role of this programme in reducing racism in the NHS England. We are also expected to be joined by Liz Rogers and Victoria Grimsell, who are two participants from the programme who will join us later in the presentation in the Voices section. This is designed as an interactive session. If you've got access to the chat box, please introduce yourself. It'd be good to start networking. If you've got any questions, you can pop them in the chat box as well. There will be opportunity to ask any questions directly to Sarah, Chloe and Liz and Victoria in the audience Q&A. In the meantime, please keep hold of those burning questions because they may be answered during the presentation. We are also recording, so I ask that you keep on mute for the time being. And if you're in an environment where you don't want your screen to be captured, feel free to turn it off at this point. Without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Chloe and Sarah. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
Lovely. Thank you, Jade. Can I just get a thumbs up from someone that you can hear us?
We can.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. So thank you everyone for joining this afternoon. Special welcome to Chris's cat. Very happy, as Jade said, to take questions throughout in the chat or at the end of this. There are myself and Sarah on the call, as well as two of our participants in the programme. What we're going to do over the next half hour, however long we fill, is just share with you our experiences, our journey of developing an inclusive reciprocal mentoring project, how we scoped it, how we developed it, and how we delivered it. And this builds on an article that has been published in The Loop in the magazine. We can share the link to that, which provides some further facts and figures around what we've done. So just to introduce ourselves, my name's Chloe Sellwood, my pronouns are she, her, and in the picture there, that is me the morning after the Vienna Marathon, looking very tired but very happy in a very fancy cafe in Vienna. Sarah?
Hi everyone, my name's Sarah Martindale, my pronouns are she, her. This is a picture of me at my graduation, so the reason I picked this is because, thank you for the claps, I used this project as in my dissertation, so my master's was in healthcare leadership, so I thought it was appropriate because a lot of the work that we did went into my dissertation.
Brilliant. So over this session, we're going to swap between us, so you hear a variety of voices and so that we can talk with passion about the bits we are particularly passionate about. Sarah's going to set out the case for change and talk through some of the data in the background. I'm then going to talk through the journey that we went through to scope and deliver the project. We're then going to invite Liz and Victoria to introduce themselves and share some of their reflections from the programme. We'll come back to myself then to highlight some of the lessons that we identified. A bit of a pause for Jade to facilitate questions from you in the audience, and then just some closing remarks from Sarah. So I am now going to move us on and hand over to Sarah.
Thank you so much. If we can go into the first slide. So this project is part of a wider programme of work that we did as a directorate. So there was a team of us within the Improvement, Transformation and Partnerships Directorate at NHS England London Region that wanted to work together to talk about race equality and what we can do as a group to improve the experience of our colleagues from a Black, Asian and minority ethnic background. And also progression, because we know, and there's lots of data, and I can share links if that's helpful to lots of various reports and articles that show, sadly, that although the NHS is a very ethnically diverse workforce, there's a lot of issues and there's lots of inequalities within experience and progression. So we did two pieces here that this slide is highlighting. In that we looked at our directorate, our immediate team, to see what the ethnic makeup of that group of people were. And we could see that there was a disparity between the progression or the representation as you went higher up the organisation. So I'll go into more detail in the next slide, which shows that. But the other thing that we did is we did a survey of our colleagues to find out how it felt to be a member of our directorate. And we've sadly found that Black, Asian and minority ethnic colleagues were 4.8 times more likely to feel that their opinions weren't valued than their white counterparts, and 1.7 times more likely to say that they don't have anybody at work that encourages their development. So yeah, really sad statistics, and I think something that drove a lot of us to try to change and to do something to make those experiences better of our colleagues, close colleagues. So this was a broader piece of work, and a part of this was to set up an inclusive reciprocal mentoring programme to try to address some of this and to share experiences between senior members of this directorate and colleagues from a Black, Asian and minority ethnic background. So if we move on to the next slide, please, I can show you some of the statistics. So this is where I get excited because I like numbers. So apologies to anyone that doesn't get excited by numbers. But here we looked at that. So there's a few caveats to this data, that we took 2 points in time, and there were changes of people moving in and out of the directorate for various reasons. So we don't know the reasons for the changes, but this was just to try and look at these points in time. What would this team look like? And we actually also had a change in names. That's why one's a P&I directorate, one's an ITP directorate, but it's broadly the same teams at a moment in time. So as you can see, for anyone, I don't know if anyone in this call is outside of the NHS, but in the NHS banding broadly, what we've got along the bottom axis is going from the sort of more junior roles to the more senior roles. So from left to right, you're increasing in seniority. And actually, sadly, what we can see is the representation from Black, Asian and minority ethnic colleagues, it goes down as we move across to the right, this broad trend that we're seeing in these graphs. And we've put some lines in to try and contextualize it. So where we're aiming for is to have a population that serves London, that is representing the London population. So this red line here is 46.2% of the London population are from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds. And then the line below, 38.7% of the regional staff are from these backgrounds, and then 19% of NHS England staff. So that was the target. So we can see if we go to band 8D on the left-hand side that we're 100% of those colleagues were white. So we're very far from any of these sort of targets that what we're aiming for. So yeah, that was where we started at, and then we can see the progression, the change in March of 2024, yeah, whether this is caused by our programme or by the work we were doing or natural changes, we don't know, but we wanted to make sure we were measuring that and kind of holding ourselves account and having transparency around what does our directorate look like and who are the people that make up our directorate. Thank you. To the next slide. We also had a lot of conversation and thought going into what we wanted it to feel like as our directorate and what our vision was and what we were aiming for. And so on the left-hand side, we've got a word cloud from our senior leadership team. What would our sort of, how would we want this to feel and what would we like this directorate to look like? So that's on the left-hand side, and on the right is the wider directorate. So we wanted it to be something that everybody could contribute to. So this is a Menti word cloud that we pulled together. And our bottom statements in the bullet points are how we wanted, once we've delivered this race equality plan, what would that feel like? So we feel safe, seen, heard and valued, and thriving in a collaborative and compassionate culture. I think everyone looking at this hopefully agrees that this would be a really nice directorate to be a part of, and that's kind of having that in mind where we're aiming for. And again, the top statement here looks more like London's population. Another sort of bow in this plan, to string to the bow in this plan, was to try to make it something that everybody is contributing to. So we asked every member of the directorate to have an objective that's related to EDI in their development plan. So this is what we suggested they were. So we've got them for the team, we've got them for the senior leadership team level, deputy director and executive director levels. So we thought if everybody it's a problem for everybody to solve. So we want everybody to take accountability and to take one of these objectives and then be measured against their performance in this objective. So it's just a bit of background to kind of the work that we were doing, and then the inclusive reciprocal mentoring sits within that programme of work. I think I'm handing over to Chloe now to talk a bit more about the programme.
Thank you, Sarah. So I'm going to, over the next few slides, talk about the journey and how we turned the theory into practice, how we took that background, that baseline that Sarah's just described, and progressed through scoping, design and delivery. So why did we choose inclusive reciprocal mentoring as an approach to try and support the development and progression of our colleagues of colour in our directorate? This slide just sets out what a definition is of inclusive reciprocal mentoring, and we've picked out some of the key words there in bold highlight, and really about it being a collaborative learning experience and a two-way process. Mentoring typically is quite hierarchical. You've generally got a more senior person and a more junior person, and the junior person is learning from the senior person. And what we wanted to do from this was really recognise that both halves of our programme, both halves of our pair, bring equal value and experience and insight. And really very much what we wanted to do was pair someone from our senior leadership team with a colleague with lived experience as a person of colour in the directorate, so both were benefiting from the other's lived experience, and really very much to have that safe space where senior leaders get the experience and insight of someone, a person of colour, and their lived experiences, and the colleagues who are not part of the senior leadership team at the time getting that exposure to what it is like as a senior leader in the directorate, and understanding kind of how things are. And part of our approach to emphasising the equality in this, the equity between the two halves, was we called them mentorees. We moved away from a mentor and a mentee type relationship. Both of them were mentorees in their relationship, and we felt that was really important to use that language right from the beginning, that they were equal partners in this process. There was no hierarchy within it. So we set out some really clear goals at the beginning, set out what the programme would do, and psychological safety was absolutely key in this for everybody, both for the participants, the mentorees, but also for those of us who were the coordinators, so Sarah, myself and our colleague Robin, and the wider support that we brought around us, and I'll talk about that a bit later on. And the programme was aimed at supporting all of us, and all of us, I think, through the creation of this safe and confidential environment. We developed self-awareness, all of us at all levels across this programme. We created some real alliances. I think Sarah and myself learned as much from doing the programme, supporting the programme, as those people who participated in it. It was hugely valuable. And the bottom one there about normalising conversations about difference, that wasn't just something that happened between participants in the programme, but more widely in a directorate. And that might be something our colleagues who took part in it might talk about a bit later on. But this programme intent was really important to get right for us from the outset. And so it really was a journey. I kind of think of it now a little bit like Lord of the Rings, and we had little side quests off to do things, and we kind of formed this fellowship around us to bring the whole programme together. I'll come to the timeline on the next slide, but this really just sets out the kind of blocks of activity that we went through, and a lot of it at the beginning was research. Neither Sarah nor I are experts in EDI, nor are we experts in organisational or personal development, but what we were was passionate. And we were committed to doing this as part of the Directorate Anti-Racism Plan. And we had the support of our line managers to do this. So we had time that we could protect to do this. So we very much recognised the limits of our own knowledge and wanted to do the best for our colleagues and for our directorate. So we did an awful lot of research, talking with people who've been part of reciprocal mentoring programmes or other programmes, and learning and educating ourselves as much as possible through online research, the Leadership Academy, places like that. We recognised early on that we, as the coordinators, needed support throughout, so we formed an advisory group with terms of reference, and that had a really diverse membership as well. So we recognised about wanting that psychological safety aspect. We brought in mental health first aiders, we brought in freedom to speak up guardians, people with lived experience, HR, comms, a whole breadth of people who could support us to make sure we weren't inadvertently doing any damage, I guess, through this programme. We wanted this to be supportive. We didn't want to cause or exacerbate any harm or trigger anything. It was really important to make sure we had the support and engagement of the people that we wanted to be part of the programme, who'd said kind of, perhaps in a flippant way, oh yeah, let's do something like this. Well, actually, they needed to commit to it. They needed to commit to their time to be part of this. So we made sure we got interest and support from our senior leadership team. And we saw expressions of interest from them and from our Black and minority ethnic colleagues in the Directorate. We then did a matching process, I'll talk about that a little bit later on, and developed a learning agreement that people could adopt, adapt and sign up to, so that both parties, halves of the party, both mentorees were on the same page around this. We had a launch event. That was really important to set the tone for the whole programme. We invited many people from our advisory group to come along to it and talk about psychological safety. I'll come to that in a moment, to talk about resources and that sort of stuff. And then it started, and there were a series of one-to-one meetings between the mentoree pairs. We facilitated 3 rounds of peer support sessions, so bringing all of the SLT together separately to all of the people of colour, and allowing them an opportunity to share with their peers how their one-to-one relationships were going. So we could then share feedback in a safe and anonymous way with the other halves of the pairs. And then we wrapped it all up. We held a celebration event at the end. This wasn't the end of the relationships, but it was the end of mine and Sarah and Robin's coordination of the programme. So just briefly to reflect on the timeline, and all I want to emphasise here, I've highlighted some key parts there, but was the amount of time for this. Top left, we started in March 2023 with our Directorate EDI group. We moved through the scoping period and investigating models and did a soft launch in January 2024. We had our first advisory group meeting in March 2024, scoped interest and commitment during April 2024, did the expressions of interest and the matching in May, and launched in June 2024. So quite a long period really between starting it through scoping to actual launch, and that was appropriate to make sure what we were doing was at the right level and had the right rigour and everything around it. The process then ran from June through to February 2005, so 8 months or so, and then that's when we had our celebration event in February 2025. But we know the conversations between those peer colleagues, between the mentorees, are still continuing without the formal framework. We had lots of questions around the matching process, and it was actually kind of a wet towel over your head kind of moment to do with it. We asked both senior leadership colleagues and BAME colleagues the same questions on the application forms. And one of the key ones, because they were in the same directorate and we were in the same directorate as well, was if there was any preferences about who they were or were not matched with. And all of that we kept completely confidential. What we didn't want to do was pair someone with their line manager. We didn't want to pair someone with someone who perhaps they'd had a previously bad experience with or something. So again, that psychological safety aspect. So we just developed a simple matching grid. You can see it here. It's just an Excel table. We coloured depending on where there was no preference, a preferred partner or someone they asked not to be with, and then we kind of worked through it, trying to align people, and some were more obvious than others, but it was really beneficial for us knowing the people and having that insight from their expressions of interest forms to match them. And you can see there's 12 senior leadership colleagues, 12 BAME colleagues. That was probably enough really for us to try and juggle all of those pairings and do the best that we could with it. And as I said already, they were equally weighted. The voice of a senior leadership team was not stronger or louder or more valid than the voice of the BAME colleague. I've mentioned psychological safety. This was absolutely key. We wanted to make sure our colleagues who were taking part in this felt safe to talk about whatever they wanted to share and however they wanted to share it. And we emphasised this, as I said, at the launch event. And these are some slides that we talked through at the launch event. And Sarah's already mentioned word clouds. We like a word cloud, and you can see that on the right-hand side of the slide, some of the aspects that people felt psychological safety meant to them in the workplace. And trust is right there in the middle of the slide. Absolutely important. Trust, transparency, no blame. And those were key principles that we held to. We also talked around some expectation settings and talked around kind of how would it feel. And we shared a whole load of materials with people afterwards. We shared links to our internal support networks. We shared links to online networks, really keen to make sure that was there. And so the launch event, again, emphasising the journey that our colleagues were going to go through. We set the expectations. We gave myself, Sarah and Robin's contacts for follow-up. We committed to doing some actions, but then they were on their own. It was very much then for the peer colleagues, the one-to-one mentoree colleagues to go off and have their conversations. And that happened for 8 or 9 months. And then we had a celebration session. And we did that again, very much driven by listening to the voices of our colleagues who'd taken part in it. And we did it as a 4-step process, looking back, where were we in the current day and looking forwards. So really, what is the programme? What their participation in it given them to take forwards for them personally as individuals? What were they taking into their practice? And finally, a little bit looking at future cohorts, and we can come round to that a bit later on in the slides. But I think I'm handing over now to Sarah and probably what is the most valuable bit of this with Liz and Victoria. Sarah, over to you.
Thank you. So I just wanted to invite our colleagues to introduce themselves. So Liz, can I come to you first and then I'll come to you, Victoria?
Hello, my name's Liz Rogers. I am no longer part of the London region. Unfortunately, I work in Sussex for NHS Sussex ICB. Had worked with Chloe for the best part of, I think, 12 or 13 years as a peer, and then line managed by Chloe. And I am of a BAME background. I was one of the mentorees.
Thank you, Liz. Victoria.
Hi folks, I'm Victoria Grimsell. I am Deputy Director of Public Inquiry and Partnerships, which covers a multitude of sins. I had the absolute joy of having Sarah and Robin in my team, and being able to support them through this was absolutely wonderful, as well as then being a participant and a mentoree on the programme.
Yes. Thank you so much. So that, yeah, without further ado, the first question that we have, why did you want to take part in the IRMP? Victoria?
Yeah, hi. So I think for me, I believe that mentoring is probably one of the most powerful interventions in a person's development. Anytime I get an opportunity to be a mentor or to be mentored, I grab it with both hands. I had in a previous organisation been in a reciprocal mentoring partnership, which didn't have any of the wraparound. It was just 2 people who wanted to learn from each other, but it really was a partnership because there wasn't the power dynamic in it, even though I was considerably more senior. I think we both learned a lot. In fact, I at times think that I learned more than my mentoree partner did. One of the other reasons I was really attracted to the programme was all the stuff around psychological safety and all of the energy and focus that went into that. The advisory group, knowing that we had some real experts in psychological safety, really meant that this programme was being framed in a very safe way. And I also found the peer support sessions really helpful in knowing what my peers were experiencing, and the commonality and the differences. So yeah. You couldn't hold me back from wanting to be part of this.
Brilliant, and we're so pleased you did. Liz, can I come to you now, please?
So my answer might shock people. So initially, I didn't. It was talking with colleagues, with my line manager, who happened to be Chloe, and talking with colleagues within the team and discussing why I didn't want to do it. That then made me realise that I probably should. So I was encouraged because I didn't think that I was brown enough, and that was apparently reason enough to get involved. I, not in the NHS, won't necessarily know the gradings for roles, but I was considered a senior manager by grade and responsibility, and I had done that and got there in spite of the colour of my skin and my background. So I kind of thought that I wasn't brown enough because I'd already made it so far in my career. And I think that was enough in having that conversation with a colleague and friend to realise the impact of racism on one's identity, and that I had adapted myself so much to downplay or mitigate rather than downplay, to mitigate my brownness, so that it didn't disadvantage me, which is quite a telling thing. So that was what pushed me forward, and I spoke to Chloe and said, okay, this is my thought, and she said, well, absolutely, you should go for it. So I did, and I don't think there definitely was no selection criteria on how brown you were or how brown you felt. There was no question like that. So I put myself forward and was accepted onto the programme, and I'm glad that I did. But the realisation that I had, probably, I'm in my mid-40s, so probably for at least 30 to 40 years of my life, had downplayed my brownness, mitigated against it, stopped using my Indian surname, for example, those types of things, in order to, I don't know, jump over any potential hurdles that may or may not have been there. Was quite opening personally.
Thanks, Liz. It's amazing that you came to that realization before the programme even began. That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing. Handing over to Chloe for the next question.
Thank you both. And Liz, I'll come to you first this time, and then Victoria. But can you both tell us a bit about kind of how you built your relationship with your mentoree partner, and about perhaps your first meetings?
Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes you just gel with people, right? So you sit down in front of somebody that you've never met before, didn't even know this person existed within our organisation. Shows how vast our directorate was. Never come across her, and we just sat down, and it was like we were long lost friends who had years and years to catch up on. So it was absolutely beautiful in that way. So I guess we built openness. It just naturally came. Would that have happened with somebody else? Maybe. So we built it on openness and respect. We shared our backgrounds, we shared our expectations. From the get-go, we were shared, supporting with each other, and that was lovely. And it was just easy to be open and honest. I didn't have to put much effort in, and I don't think that they did either. And that support sort of continued in the background. Teams messages to each other, etc. But yeah, we talked about our professional backgrounds, our personal backgrounds, things that we had coming up at work, how we're going to manage those challenges, what skills each of us had that would support with the things that were coming up for us at work. So it just felt like the right fit right from the beginning.
Thank you. Victoria?
Yeah, I would echo that. I think there was absolute magic in the matching. The matching for me and my mentoree was just spot on. There was a huge degree of synergy in terms of our experience and our outlook, and actually what we wanted from the programme really dovetailed with each other. We exchanged some very excited email exchanges before we met for the first time. And I hope it's not too geeky to say that I think we were both kind of overflowing with excitement to actually have our first meeting with each other, and that kind of bubbled over. We talked about what motivated us, and what we did some contracting work to actually know what we should expect from each other, what we would expect from the programme, and so that there was a kind of a healthy foundation for us to work together. And I think that really stood us in good stead.
Thank you. And it might sound like we've cherry-picked Liz and Victoria because of the positivity with which they experienced the kind of the person they were paired with and what they shared. That's absolutely not the case. All of our pairs shared with us through the peer sessions and through feedback forms and the regular check-ins that we did with them that they felt matched perfectly with their partner, and positivity and that kind of instant gelling, long lost friend type aspect. So I'm going to hand over to Sarah for the next bit of the questioning.
Thank you. And I'll go back. I'll flip the order again. So I'll come back to Victoria first and Liz second. So how did the relationship change or evolve over the period of the programme? So I guess the question also is, did it stay as rosy from when you first met?
Yeah, it definitely did. We had a real kind of open dialogue about what was going on for us at any given moment whenever we met. We both took part in some diagnostic exercises around our career aspirations. For example, we looked at, you can do that quadrant where you look at meaning, learning, achievement, and enjoyment, and measure where you are on that kind of spectrum. And actually, for me, there was a real insight around needing to seek out new challenges, because learning and achievement were registering quite low for me. But what I thought was really important about this is that we both did them, and then we had there was no power dynamic in the conversation. It was about two peers really sharing the findings that we had come through in these diagnostic exercises. So we did quite a real mixture between kind of structured, almost like coaching exercises that we did together, and then just conversations, other times where we just said, oh, I've had a day, and we talked about that. So yeah, a real mix.
Thanks, Victoria. Liz?
So our relationship evolved in a slightly different way due to certain unfortunate circumstances. Our mentoree relationship moved to a more online, he says, being in a virtual meeting, but a written relationship rather than meeting up in person, and that was largely due through these unforeseen circumstances of sickness. So we only ever actually met in person twice. But even then, I would say that the emphasis was on, as I said, openness and respect, but also, whilst I didn't experience that full arc of the development of the relationship in the way that Victoria has shared, I did become conscious of the balance between the roles, and felt very much like we met as equals, and our interaction, through messaging felt like we were meeting as individuals. But then I think for me, we were just able to continue things along, and I learned so much from the beginning that it almost didn't matter, because we were able to keep the communication going through messages and support each other with things that were going on both personally and professionally. So I think that's really good.
It's really, really positive to hear, Liz. And I think that there's always a risk when something moves from a face-to-face interaction to more virtually, that could have sort of detrimental relationship impact on the relationship. So really good that you were able to continue that. And I thought it might be interesting to add reflections from the broader people in the programme here, because we did hear that some of the senior leadership side of the partnership found it a bit difficult to get rid of that power dynamic, and they came in kind of with their mentor hat on and trying to adapt, and then they sort of highlighted that as something that they really learned throughout the programme, was that they learned how to be a mentoree whilst going through that and whilst that relationship was building. I'll hand back to Chloe.
Thank you. So I'm just going to ask this final question I'll come to Liz first and then Victoria. And then we'll move back into some of the wider lessons that we identified through the programme. But I think this is really key for me, is what did it mean to you, and what did you gain from going through the programme? So Liz first and then Victoria, please.
Thank you. I guess it meant a lot to have been even invited in, and to have been encouraged by you and by colleagues to take part in the programme, given everything that I said at the beginning of the first question. And then also I think it represented a recognition that conversations about race and inclusion belong at the centre of everything that we do, but at the centre of NHS culture and not in the margins. And that's really quite difficult for people without lived experience. And I found it extremely difficult with lived experience because I had marginalised my brownness. And so even though my mentoring relationship was quite brief, the programme gave me the confidence that it's possible to be more authentic in myself, although that's a work in progress. And I also think it gave me permission to stop sort of minimising parts of who I am, although again, a work in progress. And then I think finally for me, it made me realise that I have got something to bring to the table. There are many times for whatever identity you've got, be that being brown or being a woman, from my perspective and a mother, that actually what I've got to contribute is valid, that as somebody senior who had the time to spend with me thought that I actually had something to bring to the table and they could learn from me. I think that's quite interesting, because usually the power dynamic is you do a piece of work for somebody, then they say, oh, well, yeah, it's good or it's not. And then they take it away and they present it. And so, yes, I think I had more agency as a result in those meetings. It was quite nice.
Thank you. Victoria?
Yeah, I think that piece about the conversations about difference is really important. So I was co-chair of our race equality plan, and obviously we looked at representation, we looked at staff experience. Quite recently, we looked at recruitment practice, all Sarah doing some wonderful number crunching on all of those things. But there's a real difference to sort of looking at the data and seeing it and seeing what it's telling you, and it's quite a disturbing picture, but then actually having the conversation firsthand about someone's lived experience really brought to life for me what it was like to be a person of colour in our directorate. So I think I gained a real insight there. I definitely got some insight into myself, because my mentoree really challenged me around what motivates me and whether or not I was following those things and challenging myself enough to take on new pieces of work. I got a real sense that we went on a journey. It's really cheesy to say, but really going on a journey with someone. My partnership actually was cut short because my mentoree left the organisation, and that really felt like a loss and something that I wanted to continue. But what I would say is that I would definitely like to do it again. I know Chloe and Sarah have been talking to other people around our NHS England London region and about maybe expanding this, and if there was an opportunity for me to be involved again, I'd love to.
Lovely, thank you. Really grateful to both of you for sharing really quite personal reflections with us about what it meant for you and how you experienced it. And these are the sorts of things people shared with us in the peer sessions, and everyone had a unique and personal experience, but there were certainly some common themes as Liz and Victoria have shared with us today. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to move on a little bit to some lessons identified about what we learned from the participants, about the process, and I guess a bit about what Sarah and I learned ourselves, and then we'll open it up, Jade, for any questions that there might be. So for us, some of the key takeaways from a process perspective, it's really absolutely worth doing, but you need to commit to it and you need protected time. We were very lucky that our senior leadership team and our particular direct line managers gave us the free rein and the space and the time to do this. Wasn't part of either of our actual contracted jobs, but we were enabled and supported to do this because our director and our leadership team recognised the importance of it. And without that, I don't think we would have been able to do it. We were at a real sweet spot in time, I think, when we did this. We focused specifically on pairing people of colour with senior leaders due to the focus of the directorate on anti-racism. But we could have done this with any protected characteristic or just with junior bands or anything. So just because we did this with people of colour is not the reason, it's not the only way you could do this. And I've already alluded to this, but it was super helpful to actually know the people that we were doing the pairing with to try and get the best for their relationships. It probably would have worked well if we hadn't known them, but it certainly added value, and I think having 12 on each side was fortuitous, and probably the extent of our skills in doing that kind of speed dating matching process. We learned a lot, similarly to what Victoria and Liz have shared, about speaking up, about normalising conversations, and about empowering, supporting and championing, really being an ally to colleagues, and not just people of colour, but other women, people who maybe have other protected characteristics, other mothers, other carers, and so forth. So some really important personal learnings about how we do our own practice. And as Victoria said, we would absolutely love to do this again. Won't have escaped anyone's notice, huge changes underway in the NHS, particularly at NHS England at the moment. Sarah's in a different directorate, I have a different director, so we are in a very different environment now, but we would absolutely love to do this again if we could. And we would encourage anyone on this call to do something similar, anyone that reads the article. It is hugely valuable, and we would happily share our learning more fully with anyone who was interested. So on that, I'll pause, Jade, and hand back to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Chloe. Thank you to Liz and to Victoria as well. There's an immediate question in the chat box that goes back to the representation in the directorate, the very first slide that you did with the graph. John is interested in the numbers that are represented by the bars. Could you highlight how many numbers each reflects? That's the first question that comes up.
Just trying to find them.
Yes, we're trying to go back to the slide. Thank you for your question,
slide
John.
7. If that's
Brilliant,
yeah,
thank
fabulous.
you. Yeah, so we've actually deliberately removed numbers because some of them are quite small, but overall in the directorate we were about 120 people. So hope that gives some sort of idea of the size of the directorate.
Fabulous. While our attendees think of some of their own questions, as you've covered quite a lot already, I've got a couple of questions myself. The first one was around challenges. So you said that you knew the mentors and the mentees to pair them up, but was there any challenges on getting them on board? Liz alluded to some of her own personal challenges, but were there any challenges beyond that?
Shall I start? So there was some similarity to what Liz has shared, people feeling like this was a programme for them. So we did some kind of briefing to the whole of the directorate. We shared the intent and the process. We were then available for one-to-one conversations and things like that, either with people who are interested or their managers, so their managers could encourage them and support them to participate. We made available people who'd been in similar sorts of programmes as well to share lived experience with people who might be interested. And I guess there were then also a few challenges around the expressions of interest and the matching process, in as much as we had quite a big window for expressions of interest, but there were still some people who were away or who missed it or for whatever reason didn't submit an expression of interest. And there were a couple of people in the senior leadership team who everyone wanted to be paired with. And that was a bit of a challenge then, balancing whom we chose to pair with kind of the preferred individual. Sarah, is there anything from your perspective?
Yeah, I was thinking about the challenge of time. So I think a lot of people are very busy in this organisation, senior across both sides of the partnership. So I think we tried really hard to block time out and put protected time and encourage people to put more protected time in to really prioritise this. And I think that's something that you need to encourage in a programme like this, because a lot of it is reflection and taking the space and stepping away from your day-to-day to think about these things was one of the benefits, I think, of the programme.
Time is so precious, so that is a key aspect to consider. You talked about the potential of rerunning this programme. Is there anything that you do differently next time? And particularly, you've encouraged colleagues on the call today to try their hand at this programme as well within their own organisations. Is there anything that would be more specific to your organisation that they need to be aware of when adopting this themselves?
I think I've got a personal thing that I would do differently, in that I think, as Chloe outlined at the start, we were both not experts, and there was quite a lot of self-doubt, I think. But for me, I can't speak for Chloe, but we not knowing whether, like, we wanted to do something, we had this idea, but we didn't feel sort of qualified to do it. And I think just if I could go back and encourage myself, actually, like, you go for it, and there might have been a bit less hesitation, and we were able to get a really fantastic group of people in the room to discuss and to give us that assurance to go on ahead. And I'm really pleased that we did. So I think just go for it.
I think from my perspective, I also have self-doubt, so totally hear that and agree with you on that. I think it's something about the wider awareness of it and why we were doing it and what impact we wanted to have. And I think that was really clear within our directorate and with our director. He knew, he supported, he championed anti-racism, but I don't think we did enough to kind of raise the profile and promote it internally across the region. So we've had a few conversations with people in other directorates. Some of those were on the advisory committee because, again, we wanted a breadth of perspectives and so forth. But I think it's trying to get people to take the time to be able to do it, both from the coordinator, Sarah, and my perspective, as well as the participant perspectives. So yeah, I think it's just that awareness, promotion, really championing and shouting about the benefits of it.
Fabulous. Have we got any questions from our audience? I do have one more question, and I suppose it's more aimed at Liz and Victoria from your experience, just to give our attendees time to think of any other questions. But what would your top tips be? And Sarah and Chloe, do comment on this as well. What would your top tips be for anybody that wants to become a mentor and mentee in a similar programme? What would your top tip takeaways be for today?
Let's go to Liz and Victoria first, and then Sarah and I can chip in. Victoria came off mute.
Yeah, I think I would echo the just go for it. I think I would say trust in the absolute consideration and thought that went into this programme. So if you want to adopt this, do it in a really structured way, in a way where things like psychological safety have been given a lot of airtime, and therefore trust in the process, and you'll be delighted. So yeah, go for it and trust, I think.
Liz?
I think for me, it's trust your gut. Well, maybe not. I'm not sure that's what I mean. To really sort of, if you've got doubts and you think that you're not right for the programme, you probably need to reflect on why you're thinking that, rather than giving in to that doubt and going, no, I shouldn't do it, because I would have missed out on a great opportunity if I'd gone, yeah, no, I'm not brown enough. I think take the opportunity if you can.
I think my top tip is just give it a go with the right kind of support and everything around the programme, psychological safety, the available for support and so forth is needed. Just doing something to support colleagues can only be a good thing, particularly through challenges across the NHS at the moment. Sarah?
I think my top tip is probably to not be afraid to steal. So I think I'll add some context to that. We read a lot of different programmes that had been brought in. We spoke to a lot of people about how they'd run theirs, and we sort of cherry picked what we liked and what was shamelessly stealing and borrowing things. And anybody that wants to do a similar programme at their organisation, we are more than happy for you to steal from us. But so just taking the best and really learning from that was really valuable, I think.
Fabulous, thank you. I would rephrase stealing with pinch with pride.
Yes, that's better. Let's take that. Thank you.
Fabulous. I can't see any other questions that have come through the chat box. If you haven't got access, but you'd like to ask a question, feel free to unmute now to do so. We've got a couple of minutes left before we close today. If in the absence of any questions, then we will close here. In the meantime, I'm just going to pop a link to a PDF copy of today's slides for you to access, but you will also receive a copy of them via email, as well as a link to watch this session on Catch Up or watch again and share with pride for any colleagues that you'd like to make aware of inclusive reciprocal mentoring.
Thank you so much, Jade. I'll find a couple of final slides. So these are the lessons that Chloe talked us through, and so we've just talked about our top tips. And then the next slide is just to say that if you are interested in setting up and running an IRMP, we are more than happy to be contacted. Our email addresses are there, so we can chat you through, answer any questions, and help you to pinch with pride from the work that we've done. And thank you all for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Okay, fabulous. Okay, well, we'll leave it there then for today. Thank you so much to Chloe, to Sarah, to Victoria and Liz for coming on this Power Hour today and making it possible for us to learn more about inclusive reciprocal mentoring. There is a link to the article as well for more information, as Chloe and Sarah alluded at the start of today's session. Her contact details are on slide, so Chloe and Sarah, if you'd like to contact them to discuss how you can also implement this programme in your organisation. This has been an IHSCM event. We look forward to seeing it more soon, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for your time. Take care all.
Thank you.